Hello there, and welcome to another interesting episode of the interview. Today, I'm so delighted to have CS Dachet, who is a wonderful friend, and his brother here does a lot of things. I don't even know how to qualify him, right? He is a philosopher, though he tries to deny that he is a philosopher, he is a theologian, he is a missionary, he is an intellectual, an academic of renown, and he just does a lot of great things. So I will not go more into, I will not go beyond that. As we start the conversation, you will understand what I mean. So I'm so delighted to have you join me today on this platform.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Tell us, let's start by, since I didn't have any formal introduction, so to speak, I want you to just tell the viewers a little bit about you. Of course, he's a Nigerian who has been living in Europe for more than 10 years, but just tell us a little bit about your background and the journey. How did you get to Europe and stuff like that? And what do you do?
Well, thank you. Let me start with a short version of the story, so I don't take a lot of time. My name is C.S. Dachet, or Clement Stephen Dachet, as it were. I'm originally from Plateau State, Nigeria. Grew up around Bassa, which is just a stone throw away from the city center of Jos. And I studied in Jets, did my bachelor degree in Jets, and worked as a pastor in two different churches. In 2005, I actually left Nigeria for Switzerland, where I was involved with a youth with a mission work, and particularly an organization known as Bible and Society. So there I was part of a school, also as a school leader, leading some aspects of teachings and leading the school. 2008, I moved to Denmark, got married, and I'm married to a Danish lady. Together we have three kids. So I've lived in Denmark now almost like 12 and a half years. So in total, I've lived in Europe for almost 15 years, you could say. Yeah. So.
Awesome. So how is life in Denmark or in Europe generally, since you have visited most parts of Europe and a lot of things. How is life in Europe? Comparing that to Nigeria.
No, absolutely, it's different, of course. Coming from an African Nigerian, northern Nigeria, to Scandinavia, which is the Nordic part or the northern part of Europe, life is entirely different, absolutely different. These are small countries in the Nordic countries. You have Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, and sometimes you add Finland as well in the equation. And they're quite unique, both in terms of their geographical location, because they're up in the north, but also in terms of the culture and also the system of governance here. They often refer to as welfare states because basically their system is driven with so much care for citizens, free education, free health system. You could mention quite a lot of things. So if I hear America or hear Nigeria, so this is uniquely different part of the world, I would say. Yeah, and I've lived here now for over 12 years, so it's in a way has become my culture, my way of life, but still a Nigerian, of course. Always a Nigerian.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight some of those areas of difference in comparing that to Africa in general. What are some of the salient areas of difference between living in Africa or Nigeria specifically and in Europe?
Yeah, if you go back, the European part, it's quite diverse, of course. Eastern Europe is unique in its own right. Southern Europe as well, both in terms of climate, demography, and all the rest. So I've had the privilege of traveling quite a lot across many European countries, And comparing it to Africa, it's easy to look at where Europe is today and talk about its development, but it hasn't always been where it is today. A lot has happened. So many historical, things have shaped where Europe is today. Whether it's in terms of the ideologies that have shaped how Europe is organized as a society and how it's run, whether it's religion, the kind of land mark it has had, and in this sense, you were talking about not just Christianity, which is a dominant religion here in Europe, but also even in terms of Islam. How did the Europeans, related with the Arabs, or rather the Muslims? All of this, and also how did they interact with the Jewish people, and how is the rise of atheism and the rest? How has it shaped the construction of Europe, as it were? So in that sense, it's largely different. And comparing it to Nigeria or Africa at all, we would say, of course, that Christianity had been in Africa long before it came to Europe. I mean, if we go back to the history, we talk about North Africa, and the likes, where Christianity had flourished, over the years, and then sort of kind of fade away for several reasons. But on the other hand, when we look at the rise of Christianity back in what we would call the sub-Saharan Africa, then we would say Europe played a huge role, whether it's in terms of the Roman Catholic Church or in terms of the rise of the Protestant missionary movement. You had organizations like, the missionary movement in the Christian Missionary Society from England or the UK. Then you also have other organizations, ecumenical mission organizations, as Sudan United Mission, who worked in founding most of the Christian churches in Nigeria, and not to even talk about other parts of sub-Saharan Africa. So yes, there is that relationship. There is also that, you could say, that history of Christianity that is there. But beyond that, one of the things we know about the history of Europe as well, it has always had, in the past, it has had expansionist vision of stretching its rule beyond its own shores. So we've been colonized, slaves have been taken out of Africa. So all of this history kind of shaped African self-identity and how we look at the Western society. So oftentimes when people come here, there's that sense of, you're coming to a better place, which is not always the case. But that's how our history has been shaped, and that's how our mindset has been formed over the years. So there's a huge gap. Africa is of course, when you compare Europe today and Africa, you would say that, of course, Africa accounts for one of the largest growth of Christianity in the world today, compared to Europe that used to have a large population of Christians. So if you look at the per capita growth of Christianity, it's by far larger than Europe. Let's take, for example, the Lutheran Church, which started in Germany and expanded through Europe. The largest Lutheran church, for example, is not in Europe today; it's in Africa. So you're talking about Ethiopia, Tanzania. This account for a large part of the over 18 million people that adhere to Lutheranism. Or if you talk about Catholicism, Africa and South America account for a large portion of the growth of Christianity in that sense. So one could say, in terms of that, in terms of religion, that's the difference. One of the key major difference between the two, in terms of inheritance, but also in terms of divergence over the years of what has happened. So you, on the other hand, have a rise of Christianity, a form of Christianity, because of a rise of a new demography in Europe, and that is the demography of the migrants, people who have migrated for diverse reasons. Because oftentimes it's easy to talk about immigration as only relating to economic migrants, people who have come here to seek for a job. But people move for several reasons. People have moved because of wars in their countries, because of natural disasters. So you could talk about people who are moving in search of a better place of safety. And then you also have people who move for educational reasons. Of course, you would be familiar with that. People who have come for either short or long-term studies. And then you have people who have moved for marriage reasons. I mean, the world has become globalized. Travel is much easier than it were over 100 years ago, when people would travel with steam ships, that took many years to move from Europe to Africa. So there are diverse reasons, but what we've seen is that slowly and steadily the demography, or rather in Europe, has changed. The landscape has changed in terms of the peoples of that are today making or composing the population of Europe. So I mean, there are a large chunk of Nigerians across Europe, and many other Africans as well who live here today for several reasons. And then you also have the challenges of people who come here, and of course we often hear about the irregular migration, or what is known as the illegal migration. And then when you see the trans-Saharan path, where people take through the desert to cross the water between Europe and Africa in order to search for good life. So you have a lot of that. So it's a myriad of all kinds of reasons why people have come to Europe, and that, of course, this diverse categories that I've mentioned often determines the conditions that people find themselves in, whether people are flourishing or they're struggling, or they're having a really difficult times in their lives, living outside of their own country. Yeah.
Yeah, so I want us to talk a little bit about this issue of migration, especially the diasporan community in Europe. You mentioned a number of factors that contribute to this migration, especially from Africa to the West. We are talking specifically about Europe because that is where you are. I want us to talk a little bit about, some of these factors. Of course, you mentioned some people go for educational purposes. Some people are running away from disaster and conflicts, and some people go for purely economic purposes and what have you. And at the end of the day, you find one of the things you said is that people just think that by virtue of the fact that you leave the shores of Africa and go to Europe, then life will be rosy, right? And it's not always the case. Talk to me a little bit about that dynamic, and because we hear stories. I'm here in the United States. It's the same thing. Tell me the European version, because we hear stories of people, having traveled to Europe and they become disappointed. Sometimes they become more miserable than they were, or whatever they were running from Africa. They life becomes more, tricky and difficult for them in Europe. Talk to me a little bit about that, since it's something I know is something you have also been engaged in. So I think some viewers may benefit from that.
Yeah. Well, I like I said, depending on the reason for a person's move to a new place, in this case Europe, because that determines a lot of the condition that you find yourself in. If you came in here as a student, then there's a likelihood that you come into a sort of a prepared platform for you, which is you are in a school community. A lot of what you would call responsibilities are oftentimes carried by the school, and in that way you are in a limited community, not really exposed to the larger community that the school is a part of. But on the other hand, you also have people who travel for economic reasons, and sometimes the travel for economic reasons could be that people just leave their own home country without a clear plan, without a clear path, without a clear idea of what they're going to encounter. We have people, of course, who travel for economic reasons because they have a job waiting for them. Maybe they work with a company that has a branch in Europe or in Denmark, and so they are already coming into a structure, an existing structure. But there are people who just think, well, it isn't going well in my country, and so the grass must be greener on the other side. And this, of course, has a lot of danger in terms of how people live, because you have a lot of young Nigerians who trek and travel through hazardous circumstances in order to find themselves in Europe, and hoping that things would be better for them. While one would say that, of course, in terms of economic advancement, Europe is way ahead in terms of built capital. but there is no money sitting somewhere in piles or hanging on trees for people to just come and start plugging. And so oftentimes when people come, they are met with the rude awakening that one, to even talk about economic reason is one of the later things you would come and deal with. You have the social factors where being a black person or being a person of color, finding yourself in Europe, you find yourself, of course, having to learn how to build network, which is not easy, because here we're talking about a cold culture, not a warm culture like the one we're used to. Those of us coming from Nigeria, where there's hospitality is embedded in our culture, regardless of whatever is happening with kidnapping and all the other things. We're still a hospitable people by our culture, but that is not the same here. Things are structured. People are not just open to everyone that they not to every just anybody. So there is that social challenge. Then there's a cultural aspect as well. In Europe, most European countries are not English speaking, especially in continental Europe. You have German speaking, you have Italian, you have French, you have Spanish, and all the rest. I mean, I moved to Denmark. I had to learn Danish language, even though most Scandinavians speak, they're good in English, but they would prefer to speak in their own language. So a lot of people come here. So these layers of social, cultural, you could call it religious challenge, confronts them. And the reality does become how do you belong? How do you become a part, an active member of this society? So it's really a long journey of learning the language, building new friendship, building new networks, and even beginning to take advantage of those to actually build economic advantage for yourself, like getting a job. So in most cases, a lot of Africans who come here for non-educational purposes or come for marriages or others, they don't just find it that everything is just waiting for them to have a good life. It's a long journey, a tough journey. Uh, but if you have a clear path, clear idea of who you are, invested in yourself or invest in yourself, then there is a likelihood and there's a chance that of course you would improve. But most at times, a lot of Africans don't climb the economic ladder. They remain at the bottom. So you find a large chunk of them doing some of the menial jobs that doesn't require kind of advanced studies or high education. But on the other hand, we also have the issue of people who are actually forced to migrate. And this is where we talk about the irregular migration. And this happens through the whole idea of what we call today human trafficking. And sadly, Nigerian, some of the people that make a large chunk of that in Europe. If you look at Italy and other parts of Europe, some of the people who are involved in sex trade and sex slavery, uh, sadly, some of them come from Nigeria. I'm not saying it's only Nigerians that are involved in it, but unfortunately, Nigerians are a large chunk of it. And so you find a young girl who's been told that she could come here and get a job as a salon or rather beautician or whatever it is you could say. There's a job waiting for her. They're just deceived and brought into Europe and then suddenly become a slave where she has to pay somebody off that she owes without knowing, because everyone thinks it's easy here. So we have that kind of issue with a lot of people, and then you also have some who come here and they cannot find their way out and break through the economic ladder, end up in criminal activities because they have to find a way to survive, or or do some very odd jobs to be able to make life count for themselves. And so those are the challenges that are there. And it's not to say that people shouldn't travel. I think that Africans should have the opportunity to travel, as Europeans do have the opportunity to travel, and explore the world. It should be given to everybody. But I think there should be clear understanding of if you are traveling out, what you're committing yourself to, and do your research, ask questions. Oftentimes people don't want to ask questions because when you start telling them the reality, they think, "Oh, you're trying to deny me the privilege that you already have," you know. But there's a lesson that one can learn when you open your ears and open your eyes and listen to people who have had experiences. I know a lot of Africans as well who are doing well, contributing immensely to the society here. those who are engineers, doctors, and psychologists, and are active participants in the society. They face other forms of challenges. In this sense, we're talking about things like, social cultural experiences. How do I become a member of that society? How do I build network? How do I build a community? How do I, those kind of things. And in that sense, most Africans actually, in this context of the difficulty of finding community or building social network, most Africans actually end up just having themselves to build that community. So, in other words, they have very little connection to the host citizens or host community that actually supposed to be the guest. I mean, that they are supposed to be a guest to. So then you end up with what is known as the parallel society, where you go to certain parts of either London or so, and then you find that there's a part where there's only migrants, and then in that another part where you find mostly migrants, you find mostly maybe Arab-speaking people or Turkish-speaking people, or Farsi-speaking people. That's the Persian speaking, or in some cases you find Nigerian community or Ghanaian communities. And so we're kind of balkanized in that sense, where people are trying to create community in order to create a sense of belonging, to feel a part of that society. So that these are the realities that can be there, and in that sense, so you have a lot of a sense where when people are here after 1, 2, 3 years, they begin to develop a huge sense of a sense of loss, you could say, because you left home thinking, oh, you're leaving all your problems behind, and then you find yourself in a new culture. I mean, you might be flourishing, you might be doing well, but then you still suffer the sense of loss, sense of loss of connection to a place that is home, sense a loss of connection to a place that you actually fit in. You just belong naturally. You don't stand out because of your skin color. You don't stand out because of the accent, because of your accent, and the likes, So there's that balance that is often there, and is often hard to strike for many people. Yeah.
And this dilemma is hardly spoken about, but is a reality, or even here in the United States, and I know in Europe, is the same thing. This you talked about this sense of loss, which I think it's many people don't usually realize that. Sometimes people, sadly, will leave Africa and go to Europe or come to the United States, and all of a sudden they are lost. And, they were doing well, because to some extent, for you to be able to travel, if you are traveling legally, right, you have to be doing well a little bit
Yes,
in
absolutely.
Africa for you to be able to travel out.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you find yourself in Europe or in America, and you just begin to ask a lot of existential questions, because whatever picture you had about the place, all of a sudden you are disappointed, and people become despondent. Sometimes they become nihilistic about life, and they become lost. And here is the dilemma about that, right? You talk a little bit. I want you to take a little bit about that. You find yourself in a place that you feel a sense of loss, right? Whether it is in terms of social, cultural, or economic, or identity. Most of these ideas can be traced back, or most of this, the sense of loss could be traced back to the issue of identity. And here you are. It's not what you expected. You are disappointed. But you also have the dilemma of going back home. If you go back home, you know what that means, right? It's like if you're going back home, it's like you are a failure, and people have high expectations on you. People have already placed high expectations on you, and you just feel, well, if I go back home, people will say I have disappointed them. I want you to have you met people with this kind of facing this kind of dilemma, and it's like between the devil and the Dead Sea, so to speak.
And from my reflections, I think it stems from an idea of what I would often refer to as a poverty of significance. And that is a sense that we feel we don't count, we don't really measure up. Particularly when we come from a country like Nigeria or from a continent like Africa. And so there's that sense that when you come to Europe, where it's developed, and then you have easy access to many good things that are actually functional. There's that whole fear as to also, if you go back, beyond the things that you'll be missing in terms of functioning, electric system, educational system, health system, and the likes. There's also that idea is like, how would you be received? So I've met people who struggle with the sense of the fear of losing that worth, or that sense of value, or that sense of significance they think that they have built for themselves by living outside of Nigeria. And so what would become of them when they return home, or if should they return home? Because you also have the reverse expectation, where if you have traveled out of Nigeria, like, people just automatically think everything has changed for you, right? And that you should be the one who should be the giver. You should be the one who should be changing other people's life, because you are coming from a place of wealth, or a place of owning, or a place of having. And I think people oftentimes are afraid of just even going back home, because the idea is that, well, if I go back and if I eventually become broke, nobody would believe me. Because again, we live in a society of shame, right? Out of Africa, we're a society of shame. So where you have a high sense of shame, there's always also equally a high sense of dignity. So people would not want to give up that sense of dignity and respect that they think people have towards them. And that, of course, would mean they're dragging their entire family back home into disrepute and the likes. So there's that challenge of doing that. But on the other hand, you also have there is a kind of gap from those who travel out of Nigeria or Africa to Europe or to America. And you have the first generation, and we're talking about those who are the first movers, like within their family, for example. And then you have the second generation, that would be or rather the descendants of those who came with the first generation. And within these two categories, that is the parents and, for example, the children, you would have that the first generation, which in this case would be the parents, they suffer a kind of gap that is more cultural and social in nature. Because if you come outside of your country as an adult, learning, the learning is stiffer for you than the child, which is almost like his life through the child you bring at the age of 3, 5, or up to 10. They come to America, before you know it, they're already speaking as Americans, or they come to Europe and then they maybe live in Germany, before you know they're already speaking German. In that sense, so language becomes easy. Children easily adapt to new language, new culture. But most of the first generation, that's where the challenge is. They are the ones who are always caught in between. On one hand, they're not fully accepted and they don't have a sense of belonging in their own new home country, and then on the other hand, they're almost treated as outsiders in their own home country, because of this kind of expectations that I've mentioned. So sometimes people are caught, and that's why I say that there's a heightened sense of belonging, because then you actually have a sense that you've lost a place that you actually belong to. And then you have this burden of wanting to prove. For many people, that would be the case, wanting to prove something that is not there, that is not true. And I think that if we begin to have realistic conversation about our experiences, and luckily, I think that social media has actually exposed and opened up opportunities for people to have a window into how people really live. That just because you're in America doesn't mean that everything is fantastic for you, that you're sort of driving in one of the best cars, living in a mansion, all of those kind of things. It's just that your struggle continues in a much more, you could say, organized platform, if I would put it that way. So I mean, I have seen people that find it very difficult to return home, because how do I start and where do I start? And also, some other people would not go back home because of this cultural gap, generational gap rather, for their children. Their children have become well accustomed to their own to this culture that they're part of. They speak the language, and they are, in most cases, I've seen that most children actually have a sense of belonging to their parents' country because of their parents, but they don't have an experiential sense of belonging to that part, right? And so the whole idea is that, how do you go back? How do you plug a child out of this culture that he identifies with, that he calls home, that he has friends, that he goes to school at, and all of that, and take him to a whole new culture. The the, the, the reverse shock can be equally devastating as it is for somebody who moves out of their own comfort zone, their own home culture, into a new place and wanting to start life all over. So within a family, the idea of moving back can be very challenging in the sense, how do you deal with the children who are used to an entirely different way of life that only the parents are familiar with, and they have a deep sense of belonging, and the children, rather on the opposite, have a deep sense of belonging in the other part. So how do you bring them and help them to find their place, to begin to rebuild, or rather to begin to build an identity they never had, in a real experiential way, in a real practical way? Will they be accepted as co-equals, or will they be treated as people of other forms of significance other than the ones that the locals have?
And I think that is a very important point, that if you are a family person considering,
Yeah,
traveling, if you are a family person in Africa considering, traveling, not many people usually weigh that and think of it that way, because
yeah,
that is the reality for majority of family people that
exactly.
travel to Europe or America. It's
Yeah,
sometimes they leave the shores of Africa, giving themselves just some years that I'll be back, right?
yeah,
I'll be back, and they never come back. Not necessarily because their heart is not at home, but they are dealing with this issue of family,
yeah,
especially the children, that this is the only culture they know. How will
yeah,
you unplug them and plug them in a different culture? They
yeah,
are just
yeah.
Nigerians by blood, but they don't even know, they don't even understand
Yes.
the culture, and
Mhm.
that will be a lot of shock. So sometimes parents, will endure
Yeah,
the crisis of significance, or whatever you call it.
yeah.
You frame it in a certain way. You said, was it crisis of significance or something like that?
Poverty of significance at the
Oh,
first, but then
yeah,
it evolves into that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
poverty of significance. They will kind of endure that and say, well, I know that I am not actually reveling, I'm not actually, thriving here as a human being as I ought to, but for the sake of my kids, I'll just be here and
Exactly. Yeah.
and just give them a future, and
Yes.
which is usually a huge sacrifice. Then at the end of the day, it's the second generation of the immigrants that kind of, because they have acclimatized to the culture, those
Yeah.
are the ones that end up reaping, the
The
benefit,
benefit.
or,
Yeah.
or, or
Exactly.
whatever it is
Yeah.
that their parents have sacrificed
Yeah.
for them. You mentioned something about human trafficking, which we have been seeing all kinds of videos, especially in Europe, of Africans traveling to Europe, and it's alarming and disheartening. Oh, what are the European countries doing about this issue of human trafficking, especially from Africa?
Well, I mean, I do. I'm connected to some organizations that work with this issue, and I think over the years it has actually gained attention of both African governments and also European governments, and it has become an issue in the center of discussion as to how do you solve this problem of illegal, or rather irregular, migrations and in human trafficking. Uh, and it's there's no easy answer to it because it's multifaceted. But again, on another hand, it's not something that you find. For example, if you take Nigeria, it's not every part of Nigeria that you find this issue taking place. You find significantly in some parts of southern Nigeria that is happening a lot because of cultural and social reasons. And this is where I talk also about the issue of the poverty of significance, that where if the value system of a particular society is that money is the highest measure of success in life, in competing and outperforming your peers or your neighbors becomes the yardstick to measure that. Sometimes it puts immense pressure on a family or on a group of people to want to just use any means possible to make money. And so sometimes you find a lot of people who have lost hope because of the system that they found themselves in, because of poverty. And I mean, if they don't have anything to live for, oftentimes people are easily open to die for anything. So they would not mind taking the dangerous road, the road less traveled by many, in order to try to pursue this sort of significant life that lies somewhere abroad. So you have a lot of particularly young girls, teenage and early adults who have left home, uh, promised greener pastures, promised jobs, promised education, and they believed it because it's very likely somebody they knew, that it could be their uncle, their aunt, or friends that told them that they could do better if they leave Nigeria. And then they accept, and then when they come here, their passports are taken away from them, and they're faced with the reality of a job they never thought in their wildest dream that they would be involved with, prostitution, and the level of dehumanization that takes place with some of the stories of these people. When you hear it, it's heartbreaking. I recall some time back, I was visiting Nigeria, and I did pay a visit to the House of Assembly, where I visited a senator, and I raised up the issue. That was like 7 years ago, and I was shocked that that was news back then to to this member of parliament. But over the years, I think it has come into the attention of the Nigerian government. So I think the European government, of course, might be concerned about it, but it will require diplomatic, dialogues, diplomatic, uh, you know, arrangements in order to be able to deal with what you would call the surface problems that you see, and also go deep into the root causes of all of these things. But largely, when you look at it, I mean, one can blame it on poverty, one can blame it on all kinds of things, on criminal activities and stuff like that. But there has been effort. It's not enough. We still need a lot more people to be involved in it. The churches, or rather the religious institutions, the traditional institutions. Sadly, some of these institutions, in some ways, are actually, I don't know if you would call them unwilling partners, without them knowing that they actually encouraging it. When you put prosperity, for example, when we become so focused on prosperity gospel, and God will bless you at all costs. It doesn't matter where you get the money from. So it's like, what is our value system? What drives our value? What is of utmost importance to us? And so these things kind of add, and that's why I say that if people don't measure up, then they feel that they're not significant enough. So there are people who would come here, they know that they're doing very dirty stuff, and they go to Nigeria, they're kings and queens, they're treated, they build big houses, they buy cars and all kinds of things. And then, I mean, some people who are doing well, and probably haven't bought a big car or built a mansion at home, begins to get pressure from their own parents. What kind of abroad, like they put it, what kind of abroad are you living in? Look at my neighbor has done this and you haven't done it. So if somebody is, sometimes, I mean, it's not because these people who are involved in this want to do that, or that they have a choice. They've been caught in a trap, and they can't get themselves out because, one, like I said, some of them, their documents are taken away. Who would they run to if they go to and then you'll be treated as an illegal migrant, and then you'll be put in a camp where you're neither in the country where you are supposed to belong, and neither are you in the country where you come from. So it's quite complex. So yeah, one can talk about European, but we need a lot more needs to be done in this regard. Yeah.
Didn't you at some point work in some kind of organization that was, I think, working with in collaboration with the United States with the United Nations to talk about some of these issues?
No, I have been a speaker on African-related issues, on some you could call it. I have worked. I've been a consultant for. I will not call the organization, but it's related to the government because of privacy and stuff like that. I've been a consultant on the matters of it. So I've actually had the chance to have conversation with Nigerian ladies who have been either in custody of the police. Because of this prostitution work, and you're trying to talk to them Some of them don't know the way out. They don't know. They didn't just know the way out. They're trapped in it. And what will be the economic replacement? Some of them don't have good education, so they don't have anything else to do. And will the state or the government of the country be willing to give them a job? They're not. The next thing is to put them on plane and take them back. And so that's why when you are dealing with saving people who are involved in this kind of activities, or rather who have been trapped in this kind of thing, there's always the idea of dealing with cultural or what you would call metaphysical issues. Like there are some who would say, well, I have taken an oath, and if I break the oath, I'll be killed. So I'm not willing to go back home because the people who have whom I owe are going to kill me. So you have those cultural and those fetish beliefs, around the issue. And then you also have the issue of the economic reality. When they're going back there, if they are not rehabilitated and helped to re-engage in society in a productive way, they stand a chance of falling back into the same. And maybe not outside Nigeria, but they could do it in Nigeria as well. And so there's a whole idea of bringing them back, rehabilitating, resettling, and giving a new path, to deal with that. So yes, there's MECAT, a foundation, an organization run by a wonderful Nigerian lady called Anna Abok. She's used media as a medium to talk about and fight against human trafficking, and she's been doing a lot with rehabilitation, resettling, where they have safe houses in Nigeria where returnees, are able to settle in and helped to gain some forms of business skills in order to start up their lives outside of this kind of culture of prostitution or prostituting themselves. But it takes a lot, because there's a lot of trauma that you have to also deal with, psychological support for these people, or psychosocial support that you have to provide for these people as well. But I think the bigger picture would be, what kind of laws or rather is our government putting in place in order to protect that? And I can't really tell you that, because it would take the different aspects of government, interacting together and really taking a holistic approach. Like I said, looking at our social institutions, the family, looking at the educational system, looking at the traditional ruling class, looking at religious leaders, to really discuss these things and put in place certain mechanism that can help fight against human trafficking, and improve certain conditions of life. But it's a big issue. But we can continue to chip in as much as we can to fight where we can make a difference, and that can help in a long way. Yeah.
One of the things that is usually associated with this issue of migration, and especially the diasporan communities, is this idea of brain drain, right? It's like Africa's best are the ones leaving the continent, especially talk about Nigeria. The other day, someone told me the number of doctors, Nigerian trained doctors that are in New York. I was stupefied by that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I thought at first that he was just being hyperbolic, but I Googled it and realized that he was not far from the truth. And this is just in New York. And the other day, somebody told me about Nigerian doctors in Texas and stuff. So we are just even talking about one profession. We are just talking about a medical professional.
Yeah.
And I know the story is the same in Europe. A lot of Nigerian doctors, lawyers, engineers in Europe and in the United States. I just want to hear your perspective about this whole idea of brain drain. I know it's controversial, but what do you think about it?
Yeah. I mean, brain drain or brain gain. It can go either ways. And I often think there is when people are escaping their own home country in order to search for, I don't think it's necessarily always because people want to search for a better life for themselves. Sometimes it's because people also want to be able to practice uh, what they've studied and what they've learned. And sometimes the environment they tend to find themselves in doesn't provide that support. That doesn't provide that kind of accommodation for them to flourish and be of help. And of course, one would, like the doctors you've given an example is one thing, but I think we can even go beyond, go a little bit behind and say one of the, you could say Nigerians travel a lot as tourists, but we travel basically as tourists when it comes to educational tourism. We travel most as tourists when it comes to medical tourism, meaning that we're not only talking about the brain drain, we're also talking about our asset drain, right? Uh, you pay that much money to go and seek medical support outside of Nigeria when you actually have well trained. Sometimes they go out and they become the best. Look at the young man who was part of the Pfizer vaccine production,
That's
who is Nigerian. First started in Nigeria, went there, and before given the right condition, he started flourishing and became the best.
mhm.
It's not we don't. It's not that we don't have young people who have the natural capacity, natural ability to do that, but sometimes the structure,
Mm.
the way our society is organized, it's such a way that people who are supposed to actually be in the best, doing the best for the nation, are put in the worst condition.
That's
To be able to provide that kind of support and help for their own countries and give back to their own home countries, and then they go abroad and then they start flourishing, and then somehow we want to lay claim over them that they are Nigerians, and that's basically what we get at the end of the day. It's like, oh, you wait until the person becomes something, and then you start laying claim over the person, and that's the same thing with education. And that's, I think, that for me, one of the most difficult things is to see that the best place a Nigerian should get education is not in Nigeria. That breaks my heart. No nation develops by by letting its citizens be developed somewhere else. If you go back to the Greek culture, they had the Greek idea, which was that the perfect citizen had to be built in all ramifications of life. So they had the Greek, which is the paideia, where you get your word encyclopedia from, formation of a child or formation of a citizen. Because I've always believed also that a population is born, but citizens are formed, and institutions must interact in the formation of a citizen. But where you have a broken system, then the institutions are not functional. Then that institution is not able to produce the kinds of citizens that you would want, because you have an ideal expectation that your citizens should be like this, but the institutions actually that are supposed to be working effectively are not working the way they should because of systemic failure. So
Let,
what I'm trying to say in essence is that it's often easy, because when I sit here and people ask me what's the problem of Nigeria, we say bad leadership. It's beyond bad leadership. It's a broken society. It's a broken institution. It's a
mhm,
non-functioning institution, in rather institutions in Nigeria, because all of our leaders are a product of the same society, the same institutions that is
mhm.
broken. So a broken institution, or rather broken institutions, can only produce broken leaders. And so you can only give what you have. And so the question is that we need to start rethinking society. We need to start rethinking, reorganizing society. We need to start rethinking, realigning ourselves to our proper, or rather reprioritizing what our priorities are. Right? What is it that is most important to us? What is, and I feel that those are the fundamental things, because I do not believe that Nigerians cannot flourish in Nigeria. And look at some of the industries that Nigerian youth are occupying. They turn that into a massive job creation opportunity for many, despite the business climate, despite the difficulty of accessing credit and starting up business in Nigeria. You find a few very amazing stories of Nigerians making something out of nothing. But that should not be an excuse for why the system should not function effectively. Uh, you know, uh, yeah.
I think you mentioned the issue of we need some kind of cultural reorientation. And I think
Mm,
that is very important because this, illustration you gave, which is something that is very, that we see that is prevalent in the Nigerian society, right? Talk about the issue of education. You mentioned the fact that no country develops by training as citizens, outside the country. And the dilemma is that it's not only that some of Nigeria's brightest will want to go to Europe or America to be trained.
Yeah.
But there is that cultural understanding, even by some of our institutions, right? That anyone that goes outside Nigeria and receives training, they don't even care what kind of school he goes to, automatically is seen as being better than the person that received the education in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Right? If you travel outside Nigeria, we have even had situations of people going to some of these European countries that are not really better than Nigeria of education, but by virtue of the fact that they didn't receive their training in Nigeria, all of a sudden they are considered better than those some of our brightest students in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And when I think about that, anytime I think about that, it's baffling and also it's pathetic.
Yeah. And I think that, we are a nation that has been, I don't know, trying to find our identity, trying to find out who we are as a people, rather as peoples, and I have some which I'm trying to be less controversial in this conversation, but I often say to people, we don't have a shared past, but we can create a shared destiny for ourselves. Right? The story of South Nigeria. When you go back to when did Nigeria become Nigeria? When did we have this geographical demarcation? Known as Nigeria today. We've lived as various communities based on tribes and in religion, and you could go, and then we've been brought together by people who had not our best interests at heart, but anyway we're here together, and there's still agitations from different parts of Nigeria, because there are many that feel marginalized in their own home country, feel that they're not allowed to participate in society the way they should, and so it begs a question as to what is the state of nationhood in Nigeria, right? And it also begs the question, who is a Nigerian? Right? Because it's easy when you talk about this, I'm a Nigerian, but when you begin to go to the nitty-gritty of what it is to be a Nigerian, and then you begin to go into a lot of enclaves, into many more layers of what it is that you are, and then Nigeria becomes the last thing you actually mention that you are. Because then you become somebody who belongs to a particular tribe, and then you belong to a particular clan, you belong to a particular region, or you belong to a particular religion, and then you find people that you have close tribal affinity or close language affinity with, and then you form your own group of you call yourself certain things, and this plays out in our general polity as a nation. So privileges and rights are distributed based on the strongest. There's the survival of the fittest. You're born in a place in Nigeria. Your parents lived there, your grandparents lived there, but you can never lay claim of that part. But you're still a Nigerian, right? You have to go back to your own home country, or rather home state, or your village. Which it's the same thing like traveling out of Nigeria. They tell you.
Sometimes even within a state, you can't do anything in another local government. They tell you you are not from there.
And you're right. And that's what challenged my mind, my way of thinking. I live here as a Nigerian. I live in another man's country. And I want that my basic rights, as a human, are guaranteed and protected. I don't want to be treated differently because of my skin color or because of where I'm coming from. And every Nigerian who lives abroad has that sense of feeling. We can talk about Black Lives Matter movement in America and the quest for a free Black people who are self-determined and who are self-actualizing, whatever that means. But at the same time, most of us come from countries where if you move from one region of your own country to another region, then suddenly it almost feels like you don't belong. You're treated better in other countries than actually what you're treated like because you don't belong to a particular region or belong to a particular tribe. And this plays itself into all of our institutions, whether it's in terms of getting admission, getting jobs, accessing scholarship. There are people that they were born in a particular state, raised in a particular state, they cannot access it because they're not indigents. So we have this multiple layers of identifying ourselves that it makes it very complex at the end of the day who a Nigerian really is.
Sadly, some of these things even play into our religious institutions, don't they?
Absolutely, they do. Yeah. And that's why when I work, one of the areas that I work with is Christian-Muslim relations, which is when you talk to people about Christian-Muslim relations, people think you're talking about Christian compromising or Muslims compromising to form new religion. That's not the point. But we're saying that you can only share your faith in the context of a peaceful coexistence. And that will only require some level of knowledge and understanding of who the other is. You're not calling for some kind of religious neutrality, because both Islam, for example, and Christianity, they are proselytizing religions. We're seeking converts, right? We call it Great Commission movement. They call it something else. But on the other hand, even if you come from the northern part of Nigeria, which is predominantly Muslim, the core north, it's the religion is still tied to ethnicity. Your House of Fulani. So that even if you're a tribe, and if you're not, then you're a tribal Muslim, you're of another cadre. So what about the Christians? How do we treat each other? In terms of our religious institutions, I heard one of your previous guests was talking about, if you don't belong to Redeem, then if you're not a particular language, you would never aspire to the highest position. But it's a sad tale. Sad reality that we're faced with, and we've experienced it in different forms. There's nobody born in Nigeria who has gone to school in Nigeria. It's a beautiful country. I would not trade being Nigeria for anything else. I love and I'm proud of being a Nigerian, and I put my mind to what I want to do, and I don't want to use the brokenness of Nigeria as an excuse why I shouldn't pursue my dream and be who God has made me to be. But at the same time, we have to find a way to fix. For posterity's sake, for the generation yet unborn, because it would take. The Bible often talk about changes happening up to the fourth generation, right? So if you're going to do a change that is going to be significant for Nigeria, I think our generation will only be the sacrificial lambs. Are we willing to sacrifice for the generations that will come, to bear? And that for me is where the concern is. We're still talking about whether you're Muslim or Christian before you have access to good health, good education. You cannot do certain courses because you don't belong to certain religion. What if the person who is supposed to be that would have actually discovered a particular drug that would have killed one of the problems that we're faced with, or come up with an economic theory that would change Nigeria, suddenly was denied the opportunity because he doesn't belong to a certain religion or doesn't come from a particular region.
And you talked about this previously. I don't want to take us back, but that is what makes this idea of brain drain very controversial, right?
Yeah.
Because you have Nigerians are generally intelligent, right? We are some of the smartest people on the whole planet. There is no denying that fact, right? Yeah. But you have all these gifts and talents, and you say, well, I am, a true African. I don't want to go anywhere. I will stay here and do this. And you're confronted with some of these challenges that don't even allow you to thrive. And if you begin to thrive and you don't have some of these connections we are talking about, then they have a way of just bringing you down and what have you. So at the end of the day, some of our smartest people that leave the country or talk about Africa in general, it's not as if they don't love the country. Every Nigerian that I've ever met, even here in the US,
absolutely,
our hearts are back home. But you think about some of these things, and you come to a foreign country that, if you know really what you're doing, to some extent, of course, we talked previously about some of these other challenges that you find in a foreign country, but to some extent, when you go out, you find some of these countries, because of the structure, they allow you to just be whatever you want to be, right?
Yeah,
you can't do that in your country.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one of my early shocks when I came to Europe was the fact that there are a lot of things that we own in Africa as commodities, and Europe doesn't have them. For
Mm,
example, when I lived in Switzerland, Switzerland prides itself as the best chocolate producing country in the world. But in all of my time staying in Switzerland, traveling across, I've never seen a tree of cocoa in any part of Switzerland.
mm,
But they have abundance of chocolates in their stores. They celebrate birthdays and whatever it is. If you travel to Switzerland, you know that chocolate is a big deal. But then you go to Africa. I watched a particular documentary at a point where uh, in the cocoa in the place where in the cocoa producing parts of Africa, somebody took chocolates there and was giving it out to the community that actually produced those cocoa, and they had never seen chocolate in their life,
mm.
and they've never tasted it, and they were shocked that it was out of the cocoa that they were producing that product was coming from. And this is again where I say that we could talk about brain drain and brain gain, but neoliberalism hasn't always played well for Africa. Because on one hand, while we own natural resources, the fact that we don't own tools of production means that we are at a disadvantage. So whatever commodities we have oftentimes go to waste. But that's why I think when you look at the new generation today, a lot of young people are trying to add value in the chain of production. So, for example, if you have mangoes, rather than, I mean, most part of northern Nigeria, you find during the rainy season, a lot of mangoes are, grow on trees without anybody really planting them or doing any taking care of them. But a large chunk of those just go to waste and destroyed, and then people will wait again for the next season. So we don't have processing equipment, and it seems as if I'm digressing, but I just want to make a point. So the absence of tools of production means that we are in some ways dependent on others. But we can also do it in the reverse, where we say, "Can I go out?" And this is where I feel like whatever has become of brain drain can actually be a brain gain for Nigeria if we do have a strategic plan as for example, look at most of the Asian countries. Some of them were basically at the same level with Nigeria at independence, but they have learned to translate their brain drain into a brain gain and actually develop themselves into a place where they own tools of production and can fabricate those tools of production in massive quantities, where they've gone from small scale, you know. Farmers who people who farm at the backyards and to actually industrializing their own nation, where farming has been industrialized, big industries has been industrialized. We are still talking about the still subsistence farming in Nigeria. Of course, there are a number of great Nigerians who are building farms and doing other things, but we need a lot of more people to come back, who have the skills and who can. But of course, when they come back, the question is oftentimes, will you have access to credit? A white man comes to Nigeria or a Lebanese comes to Nigeria, he has much easier access to credit in our banks than a Nigerian will walk into the bank and get.
That's right.
I don't know if it has changed right now. So when you have this, again, it goes back to the point of poverty of significance. We're not good enough. We don't measure up. So a white skin is better than a black skin. We will bow down. We will lick the boot of a white person. Sorry, I'm not trying to be racist here, but I'm just saying is that if fundamentally, if at the core of black, white, green, whatever color of humanity, we are humans, that's what makes us unique. That's what makes us unique. It does. Your skin color shouldn't be something that you're ashamed of. That makes you feel that you're less significant than somebody who's having a white skin or who has a pointed nose. But we haven't done it in a way where we put ourselves in perspective, where we put ourselves in position to be able to accelerate growth. We've actually put ourselves in. Oftentimes, I think it's also a generational thing, because you find most younger generation, particularly the millennials. No, not the millennials. Sorry, the millennials. Of course, is what I'm talking about. They are more optimistic. They are more focused, and a lot of them have started a lot of things, and I'm really impressed when I talk with quite a number of them who have. Some of them have had the opportunity to travel abroad, but they had the courage to stay. But of course, I've also seen some who have become discouraged because, despite their desire to make significant changes, they've not been able to get the necessary support needed. Where you would find somebody will come from UK, a white person will come with suit and tie and sit in an office, and the government is willing to pour money, to go into big partnership. And then they have a young person who is inventing stuff here. They would not invest in that person and find a way to scale that out. to include more people and create more job opportunities. So we need to. Poverty is not just the absence of things, and it's also a sense of significance, you know, to ourselves.
Sometimes I see videos of anytime I see these videos, I get emotional, right? I see videos of some guy in somewhere in Nigeria producing something. Sometimes this guy has not even gone to primary school, not to talk of secondary or tertiary institution, but he's inventing something that if it were in a country that is fully functioning,
Yeah.
it's something. And you just see this shared on social media, and that is where it stops. The government will see this, and nobody pays attention to that, and it baffles me. Let me say, let me just project something that Reverend Zakaria Chine said. I don't know whether you want to respond to that.
Yeah.
But he says, I often think there is no such thing as citizenship expectation as far as Nigeria is concerned. Nigeria suffers from foundational defects from where the seeds of crisis of citizenship were sown.
I mean, I totally agree with him, and that's what I'm saying. Nigerians are treated as subjects; they're not treated as citizens. Because if we understand what it means to be citizens, it comes with your role in society, your responsibility, your rights, and your privileges. So you see, I balance it out, not just talking about the rights and privileges, but I'm saying your role. Who are you as a citizen? And that is why I said from the start, it's easy to give birth to a population.
Hmm.
But if you have to have citizens, you have to form them. And every nation that has developed, the concept of nation state was built around that. So even when you look at the marriage between state and church, or rather the cross and the crown, it was a whole idea. For example, when you take most part of Europe, where you have the issue of infant baptism, it was a form of also an entry into being accepted as a citizen. And when you look at, if you look at traditional African society, our folklores and our folk tales and all of those things, these small communities believe that to become an active member of the society, knowledge had to be preserved, knowledge had to be transmitted from one generation to the other. So there are certain expectations. So even in our what people would call primitive, I don't know why they call it primitive, we had this simple understanding that our communities, to become a member, you have to be formed somehow. You have to be shaped. You have to pass through stages of life. But what we have, sadly to say, is that we're just churning out populations that actually are not becoming citizens. And when I say that, and I mean that seriously, because let me go back to some of our institutions. Let's say institution of learning. A large chunk of our Nigerian, doctors and best, what you could call them, best minds, have to go abroad to study, because one, it's not because we don't have quality lecturers or professors in Nigeria, but when you have incessant strike actions, right now we're talking students are at home, they cannot go to school, so there is inconsistency in the educational system. Some of the curriculums that they're using, they're outdated. They needs to be upgraded. Schools are funded as not as investments. They are funded as recurrent expenditures. So the government looks at this annual budget and it feels as if, oh, we don't have enough money for education. You're talking about that which forms your citizens. So when you go to places like Hungary, I went to Hungary at a point, and I was shocked to notice that in some of the universities, they had special hostels built for Nigerian students.
Hmm.
They understand the money they're making out of the Nigerians. They're sucking our money out. And at the end of the day, some of these Nigerians will not go back home. They will stay back there because they want to practice their profession. They don't want to go back home and then they're worrying about salaries. They're worrying about privileges of allowances and other things, which they should not be thinking about because of what they're giving to the nation. Or you have engineers who are trained and they're afraid to go back because they would just be put behind a bench and they will not have the access to be able to do what they are. And that's because fundamentally we don't understand what it's like to be a citizen. And we think that we can sublet the formation of our own people to another country. So you have people come from Russia, they come from all parts of the world, and we have a conglomeration of all kinds of identities that we have in our nation. When are we going to take responsibility for our own and begin to say from cradle to grave, Nigeria wants to have a hand in the formation of its own people? So I totally agree with him. And that's why I think that Nigerians don't even know what to expect from their government. We all know something is wrong, but we don't know how to fix it, right? Even somebody who doesn't, you don't need to go to school to know something is wrong. The things that, and it's not okay the way things are. It's not okay, and we cannot pray and wish it out or prophesy it out like that. You have to have fundamental strategies and plans in place. You know, we have a great amount. I mean, we have one of the countries that is the most religious. The growth of Christianity is at an astronomical rate. Churches are being planted at I mean, we're the great church planters. You know, we have all kinds of prophets. If that could change a society, transform a society, that would have happened. You know, but again, in our mind, we've been ingrained to think that, well, if you question anything religion, then you're doomed. But we need to start asking questions, critical questions. We need to start asking questions. We cannot just lay back and just wish things away and wish them into existence. It doesn't happen like that. And that's why you have a situation where somebody who doesn't own any resources is living better than the one who owns nearly 30% of the resources of the world is owned in Africa. But yet Africa is a case study for poverty.
Well, what a great way to end this conversation. I mean, I and Dachet can talk till tomorrow. I know we have had our own conversation, private conversations. I know he can go on and on. This brother has a lot. There are a lot of things I wanted us to talk about, but we just succeeded in talking about just one aspect, which is good. Someday, I believe we are going to have to pick up from wherever we stopped and have another conversation. You are always interesting to talk with. Thank you so much for making time to be part of this conversation today.
Thank you for having me. I totally forgot that I was actually on live. So I was just talking to you.
That was good. It was good you forgot yourself to be able to say the things you said.
All
right.
Thank you, and I just want to really say what you started is great. This platform you started, it gives an opportunity for people to discuss and say their heart. I mean, we don't have to always agree with what we say. I don't expect people to agree with everything I've said, but I'm willing to learn from those who disagree with a point that I've made, because then it will help my blind side, and hopefully I can see things differently as well. Yeah, thank you so much, and I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for all of you that participated and watch this. I really appreciate your time. Until I come your way next time with another interesting guest. Bye for now.
Thank you very much.